Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and mutilated good guy dolls. I'm Noah Hook, and today I'm ranking the 10 doll deaths from the Child's Play franchise. Chucky and friends have had some gruesome deaths through the years, and these pint-sized terrors are usually some of the hardest killers to put down for good, and today I'm going to share which of their deaths I think is the greatest of all time. Here are the 10 deaths I'm using for the ranking. I'm counting Chucky's deaths from Child's Play 1, 2, and 3, Chucky and Tiffany in Bride and Seed, Buzzcut Chucky in Cult, and Chucky and the Buddy Bear from the 2019 Reboot. So the only movie not included in this list is Curse of Chucky. I used a variety of criteria to rank these doll deaths, including inventiveness. How much does this kill stand out in the pantheon of horror villain deaths? Uniqueness to Child's Play. Does this kill take full advantage of having a killer doll, or could this have been any old killer? Quality of effects. How good does this doll corpse look? And cool factor. This is basically how much I like the kill. Everybody has their favorites. Before jumping in, I just want to say that this is a pretty subjective list, and my rankings might not match up with yours, and that's okay. Let me know what your favorites are down in the comments below. With that, why don't we jump into the rankings? Number 10. To hopefully nobody's surprise, the doll death coming in last place is the Buddy Bear from the 2019 Reboot. The Buddy Bear is actually kind of cool, but it's simply a henchman to Chucky. It mauls one guy and stalks Andy before quickly getting wrecked by a child pretty much off screen. The bear was pretty much here just so I could get up to 10, so let's move on. Number 9. My least favorite Chucky death comes from Bride of Chucky. He just dies way easier than any of his other outings. He gets stabbed by Tiffany, slapped with a shovel by Jesse, and is eventually shot a bunch of times by Jade. His fight with Tiffany is great, but I'd say that played a very minimal role in his death, so it doesn't really add to the outcome. There isn't necessarily anything wrong with this kill, it's just pretty generic and not as memorable as his other deaths. Number 8. The 8th spot is going to Tiffany in Seed of Chucky. An axe to the head is cool, and in most franchises, that kind of death would probably rank higher, but it's just a pretty quick and straightforward death, and definitely Tiffany's weakest in the franchise. Still more exciting than gunshots though. Number 7. The 7th best death is going to Chucky from the Reboot. This out-of-control AI meets his demise when he messes with Andy's mom. Andy is cutting the rope Karen is being hung from, and Chucky tackles him. They both grab onto the rope and Andy manages to finish cutting it, sending them down to the floor. Andy grabs the doll's knife and stabs him in the chest, but that doesn't put him down for good. He jumps at Andy and is shot by Mike Norris, and finally has his head torn off by Karen. Technically, Chucky isn't even alive, and he also switches his AI into another doll, but this specific body is destroyed, so it counts in my book. It's more involved than the previous deaths, but the general lack of blood and guts and Charles Lee Ray personality can't get it any higher. Number 6. Now we're getting into the pretty good stuff. My 6th favorite doll death is Chucky in Seed. Moments after killing Tiffany, Chucky is challenged to a duel by Glenn. In true Seed fashion, it starts off pretty ridiculous, with Glenn showing off his karate to outclass his father. He kicks Chucky across the room and proceeds to cut every limb off his body. It's a bittersweet death as it both serves as revenge for Glenn but almost as a downfall as well, as he wanted so badly not to be the killer his father was. It's a long, grueling death, and Chucky takes it like a champ, applauding his son all the way up to his decapitation. Once again, I'm not certain this was a total death, as human Glenn gets the arm in the mail, but it's so unclear what happened between Seed and Curse, I'm willing to count it. Number 5. The 5th spot is going to doll Tiffany's first death from Bride of Chucky. Before Chucky's disappointing gravesite shooting, and a bit after getting crisped to shit inside an oven, she and Chucky get into a fierce battle when she decides she can't continue down the same path as Chucky. After stabbing him in the back, Tiffany gets smacked with a shovel by her not-so-dead husband. She grabs a shovel of her own and even manages to choke Chucky, but she's ultimately put down by the same knife she betrayed Chucky with. She even survives long enough to give birth to their darling baby. Her battle with Chucky was well fought, and the charred look of her body is super unsettling. Tiffany was a great addition to Chucky, and she held her own amongst him, even in death. Number 4. Alright, it's all Chucky from here on out. I'd say these final 4 are pretty much the cream of the crop as far as Chucky deaths go. My 4th favorite death goes to Child's Play 3, where Chucky is ripped to shreds by a giant carnival fan. He's had half his face sliced off, but has an unconscious Tyler at the peak of a skull mountain to perform the ritual. Too bad a sharp-shooting Andy Barclay is around and shoots off his hand and hits him again in the chest. That wasn't enough to finish Chucky though, and he nearly sends Tyler off the edge. Tyler manages to get his knife to Andy, which he uses to slice off the doll's remaining hand. Andy throws him over and Chucky plummets down in a great looking and sounding shot. Child's Play 3 isn't the greatest Chucky film, but his death at least ends the movie on a high note. I love the look of Chucky's face muscles, and of course I love a good stormy chant. Number 3. You all may have expected the first 3 films to be the top 3 Chucky deaths, and I totally understand if you rank them that way. But for me, Buzzcut Chucky's death in Cult narrowly edges out Child's Play 3. It's not as grandiose as many of its peers, heck, it's not even the end of the movie, but damn if it isn't satisfying. Chucky finds Andy in a white room, and these longtime best friends get right to it. Chucky heaves a knife into his knee and is positioned to stab Andy again, but Andy isn't a little boy anymore and is able to overpower the children's toy. With his bare hands, he tears through Chucky's torso to grab a pistol he hid inside the doll before it was brought to life. He shoots Chucky a bunch of times, even once in the head. That doesn't quite finish Chucky off, so Andy smashes his head like a fucking pumpkin. It's great to see Chucky now has an equal opponent, especially now that he has multiple bodies, and it's definitely the most personal Chucky kill of all time. Andy is filled with as much hate as Chucky, and he rips through him the way the villain in a horror movie would. Great stuff. Number 2. So y'all know what's left for me to choose from now, and it was not an easy decision. They are basically tied for me, but a decision had to be made, and I decided second place goes to the original Child's Play. This death is fantastic. Chucky has nearly completed the ritual on Andy, but gets trapped in the fireplace and lit up by the tiny boy. Watching the melting doll flail around in agony is horrifying, and it's even more so when you realize he isn't dead. This melted, charred up Chucky stalking towards Andy is truly unsettling, and I love the animatronic look for this. Karen eventually shoots him to pieces, even removing his head, and that little bastard still isn't done. His headless body crawls through a vent just to choke Mike's partner, and eventually it is shot in the heart, and Chucky's head slowly loses life. I have no complaints about this death, and it being number 2 only speaks to the greatness of my number 1 choice. It capped off a great movie with a great ending, and I completely understand if it's your number 1. Speaking of, number 1. Well, it all came down to this. My number 1 favorite doll death in the Child's Play franchise is Chucky in Child's Play 2. So much goes into this fantastic finale, starting with the awesomeness of the Play Pals factory. Not to mention Chucky is straight raging as he's realized it's too late to transfer his soul into Andy, so now he's just out for blood. He chases Andy up a conveyor belt, but Kyle slams a gate down on his hand, forcing him to rip it off to get out. Always an optimist, Chucky utilizes this new stump for a fancy new blade hand. He once again nearly slashes Andy, but another assembly machine sews him down, and he's sent back inside of the machine, which seems to have attached a bunch of new limbs to him. But Chucky managed to get out of there before too much damage was done, although he did lose both of his legs. He knocks Kyle out with the eyeball corpse guy, and crawls toward Andy on some sort of little cart. He cuts an air tube and lunges at Andy, but only gets his blade stuck inside of a grate, which is unfortunately placed beneath a huge vat of melted plastic. And badass little Andy releases it right onto the good guy, which yeah, fucks him up real good. Even as a regular human, that sounds like an awful way to die. But this is Chucky, so you know he ain't dead yet. After Andy saves Kyle from extra limification, the molten Chucky again attacks Kyle, but Kyle is able to grab that cut air hose and jam it into his mouth. His melted flexible head fills up with air until it finally explodes in beautiful gooey perfection. It's one of my all-time favorite horror villain deaths, and it's so well deserved. Chucky is absolutely relentless and definitely at his scariest here, and his means of death is so unique and is a great use of the factory setting. All in all, I think it's the greatest Chucky slaying we've seen to date. So there you have it, those are my Child's Play doll deaths ranked. I know it was kind of a silly thing to rank, but I had a lot of fun doing it, and I hope you had a lot of fun watching it. And I also hope I did your favorite kill justice, and remember, be sure to let me know down below which is your favorite. And if you haven't watched it already, be sure to check out my top 10 human deaths from the Child's Play franchise. Well, that's about it. Next week I'll combine my last 2 months of Chucky research to officially rank the films. Which one will come out on top? Tune in next week to find out. Thank you all for joining me, and an extra thank you to my patrons. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and this has been Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my Child's Play doll death rankings video. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all my Chucky content. And if you want to support the channel further, be sure to check out my Patreon account. You'll be able to request specific movies for me to cover and vote on future franchises. Thanks, y'all.